Eleanor Vance had always been a woman of quiet routines. A librarian for 25 years, she found solace in the hushed reverence of the written word, in the orderly shelves stretching to the high ceilings, in the comforting weight of a well-worn book in her hands. Her life was a well-thumbed tome, predictable and peaceful. She lived in a small, neat house in suburban Connecticut, the same house where she'd grown up. Her husband, David, was a high school history teacher, and their 2 children were off at college, leaving a silence in the house that was both welcome and a little too loud. But inside this tranquil existence, there was always a low hum of something missing, a feeling she could never quite put her finger on. Her parents, both gone now, were wonderful, loving people. They had given her a childhood filled with security and affection. But they were also private, closed off. Any questions about their families, about their history, were met with polite but firm deflections. "It's a long story, dear, not very interesting," her mother, Clara, would say with a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her father, a man of few words, would simply change the subject. Eleanor, being an obedient and understanding child, learned not to push. This void, this genealogical blind spot, became a mild curiosity in her adult life. She'd watch those commercials for DNA kits, the ones with tearful reunions and newfound cousins, and a small part of her would ache. A silly ache, she told herself. What did it matter? Her family was here with her. But still, the question lingered. Who was she? Really? Where did she come from before her parents' story began? One dreary Saturday afternoon, scrolling through her phone, an ad popped up. A spring sale on a DNA ancestry kit. It was a whim, a careless click of the Buy Now button. A little indulgence, a harmless game. She thought she would find a few distant European cousins, maybe confirm a lineage she vaguely knew about, and put the nagging feeling to rest. The kit arrived a few days later, a stark white box with minimalist lettering. It sat on her nightstand for a week, then a month. She was almost afraid to open it, to disturb the quiet certainty of her life. But finally, on a rainy Tuesday, she tore open the box, swabbed the inside of her cheek, and sealed the sample in the tiny vial. It was a simple, sterile act, a quiet moment of defiance against the unspoken rules of her past. She mailed it off, trying to forget about it as soon as the mailbox clanged shut. The results came back 8 weeks later, an email notification with the subject line, "Your DNA results are ready." Eleanor's heart gave a strange little lurch. She clicked the link, her hands a little unsteady. The screen loaded, revealing a colorful pie chart of her ethnic makeup. Mostly Irish and English, a bit of Scandinavian. Just as she had expected. She was about to close the tab, a sense of anticlimax washing over her, when she saw it. A small, almost hidden button at the bottom of the page, DNA relatives. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the mouse. This was the part of the game she hadn't been prepared for. She clicked. A list populated the screen, starting with the closest matches. A third cousin here, a fourth cousin there. The names were all unfamiliar. But then, right at the top, a name stood out, a name with a glaringly high percentage of shared DNA. Beatrice Sterling, first cousin. First cousin. Felt like a punch to the gut. A first cousin was an immediate, undeniable connection. A child of her mother's or father's sibling. But her parents were both only children. This was impossible. The company must have made a mistake. A cold wave of disbelief and dread washed over her. She reread the page, her eyes scanning for an error, a footnote, anything to explain this glaring impossibility. There was nothing, just the stark, unblinking truth. She had a first cousin, a Beatrice Sterling, who lived in some town she'd never heard of, in a state 1,000 miles away. 1,000 questions screamed in her head. Who was this woman? How could they be related? Did one of her parents have a secret sibling? The idea was so preposterous, so contrary to everything she knew about her family, that she almost laughed. But the percentage was there, a number that didn't lie. It was too high for a mistake. The calm surface of her life was cracking. The quiet, peaceful existence she had cultivated for so long felt like a flimsy shield, And this was the first crack. The first sign of a storm. She didn't sleep that night. She stayed up, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory she had of her parents. Their quiet lives, their gentle smiles, their guardedness. It all made a terrifying kind of sense now. The vague answers, the changed subjects. They had been hiding something. Something monumental. She looked at her father's old photo album, pulling it from a dusty box in the attic. The pages were filled with pictures of her mother, Clara, a beautiful woman with kind, melancholic eyes. There were photos of her as a young woman, but they all began at the same point, her meeting Eleanor's father in the early 1970s. There was no past before that. Nothing of her family, her childhood, her life before she became Mrs. Vance. It was as if she had simply materialized, fully formed, into her father's life. Eleanor's hands trembled as she saw an old black and white photo tucked into the back of the album. It was of her mother as a young woman, maybe 18 or 19. Next to her, a man with a stern face and an arm around her shoulder. And a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, with a mischievous grin. Eleanor had never seen this photo before. The faces were unfamiliar. The photo was a foreign object, a shard of a life she didn't know. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What was this? Who were these people? She searched her mother's things, a box of trinkets and old letters. There was nothing. No birth certificate, no old addresses, no clues. Just a few letters from a friend from her college days, all of which had been sent to her father's address. It was as if her mother had meticulously erased her past. The next day, Eleanor stared at the contact button on her screen. Message Beatrice Sterling. What would she say? Hi. I think we're related. And my parents lied to me for my entire life. It sounded insane. It was a Pandora's box. A can of worms she knew she shouldn't open. But the low hum of curiosity had become a roar. She couldn't unsee what she had seen. She couldn't unlearn this new, terrifying truth. She finally took a deep breath, and with a trembling finger, she began to type. The first step into a world she never knew existed. A world that was about to shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. The simple act of sending a DNA sample had ripped a hole in the fabric of her reality. And she was about to step through it. This was no longer a game. This was a mystery, a secret buried for half a century, and it was about to be unearthed. And Eleanor Vance, the quiet librarian, was the one holding the shovel. Eleanor's fingers hovered over the keyboard, each word appearing with a struggle, like fragments from a shattered mirror. She typed and deleted, trying to find a way to sound both polite and to convey her utter bewilderment. Finally, she sent a message that was so brief, it was almost absurd. Hello, Beatrice. My name is Eleanor Vance. I just got my DNA results and we have a very high match. I believe we are first cousins. I just wanted to say I had no idea about this connection. If you have time, I would love to talk. It said nothing of the truth, nothing of the shock, the dread, and the fierce hope that swirled within her. But it was all she could manage. She hit send and felt as though she had dropped a bomb into a quiet sea. The reply came almost instantly. She had not expected that. Beatrice Sterling was online, and probably staring at her own screen just as Eleanor was. Eleanor. Oh, my God. I've been waiting for this message for a year. That was the opening line. Eleanor's dread gave way to confusion. Waiting? Why would she be waiting? Me too, Beatrice continued. I did this DNA test to look for my family, to look for my mother's sister and a cousin. That's you. It was all too fast. Beatrice asked if she was free to talk on the phone. Her voice was filled with emotion, a slight catch, as if she were holding back tears. Eleanor, with her heart thumping in her chest, agreed. The call lasted for almost 3 hours. 3 hours that completely dismantled the world Eleanor had known. Beatrice was a woman in her 60s, with a warm, gentle voice. She began to tell her story. Beatrice's mother and Eleanor's mother, Clara, were sisters. Eleanor's mother's real name wasn't Clara Vance. Her birth name was Caroline Sterling. Their story was like a tragic novel. Their mother, Florence, passed away when Clara was just 3 years old. The father, a wealthy but ruthless man, decided to give Clara away to another family. He didn't do it because he was unable to care for her, but to cover up some sort of scandal, a secret he never revealed. He said it was better for her to go, Beatrice said with a catch in her voice, that it was for her safety, and he made a deal with a young woman and her husband, a very powerful man. They would take Caroline, and in exchange, my father would sort out some financial matters for that man. He erased all the traces, Beatrice continued. He made sure no one knew my mother had a younger sister, not even us. He said she had died. A cold shiver ran down Eleanor's spine. Died. Her parents had lied to her all her life, and now she learned that a birth father had lied to his entire family. He had declared his daughter dead. But Beatrice never believed it. She said there was an old diary of her mother, Florence, with cryptic entries about a little child being taken away. Beatrice had spent her entire life looking for that lost sister, looking for the little Clara with the emerald eyes that she only vaguely remembered from old photographs. I knew she was alive, Beatrice said, her voice full of emotion. I knew it in my heart. And now I found you. You are Clara's daughter. The news was both staggering and overwhelming for Eleanor. A part of her yearned to believe the story, to fill in the blank that had haunted her all her life. But another part was suspicious. The wealth, the secret deals, a family scandal. It all sounded like a dark fairy tale. She asked Beatrice for more details about the Sterling family, and the story began to get more complicated. The Sterling family wasn't just old money. They were a dynasty. Beatrice's father, Sebastian Sterling, was a notorious financial titan. He was involved not just in banking, but had connections to the most powerful people in Washington and New York. His estate was vast, and after his death, it was locked in a complicated trust. Beatrice explained that there was a clause in her father's will. The entire fortune could only be unlocked and distributed if all the direct descendants of the family were identified and accounted for. I did the DNA test to find Clara, Beatrice said, because I knew that only if we found her could we reclaim what was ours. A warning bell went off for Eleanor. This wasn't just an emotional family reunion. It was a scheme, an elaborate plan to take control of a massive fortune. And she was a part of it. She couldn't stop thinking about it. What did this mean for her? Was she being used? Was this friendly woman, who told her a tragic story of a broken family, only concerned about money? Fear crept into her heart. She looked at her own life. A small house, a quiet job, a husband and children she loved. It might be mundane to others, but to her it was peace. And now that peace was threatened. She told Beatrice she needed time to process everything. She hung up the phone, her mind reeling. She went straight to the library, to the place where she felt safest, to a place where stories had neat endings and never came with abrupt twists. She found a computer and typed Sebastian Sterling into the search bar. Hundreds of articles came up, old stories about finance, politics, lavish parties, and hushed allegations. But there was nothing about a missing daughter. Nothing about Clara. She saw an old article from the 1970s, with a headline, Sterling Family Faces Complicated Lawsuit. It talked about a lawsuit over the estate, one that was mysteriously squashed. Eleanor felt a chill. There was a secret buried in this family, a secret her parents had known. She began to doubt. Was her mother truly a victim of a cruel father? Or did she agree to leave to be protected from something even worse? Eleanor looked at the black and white photo she'd found in her father's album. The stern-faced man next to her mother did not look like anyone in the Sterling family photos she saw online. 1,000 more questions appeared. Who was that man? Why was that photo hidden? She felt like an amateur detective, caught up in a cold case that had been sleeping for a long time. And the only living witness was her own frail, aging father. Eleanor knew she had to confront him, to ask him for the truth. His health was failing, and she was afraid she would lose her chance to get the answers forever. She needed to know why they had done this, why they had hidden her origins. She needed to know if she was a part of a conspiracy, a scheme, a buried secret. The door to a new world had been opened, and she could not go back. The confrontation with her father, a man whose mind was mostly gone, was a terrifying prospect for Eleanor. She found him sitting in his old armchair, his eyes staring into the distance. She felt a pang of guilt for having to press him, but she knew this was her only chance. She gently placed the old photo on the table. His cloudy eyes finally focused. A flicker of recognition passed over them, a momentary look of panic. "Clara," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You knew about it, didn't you? About my mother's real family." Took him a long time to answer. Like an old record player, his mind had to slowly spin to find a memory that was buried deep. Finally, he looked at her, his eyes welling up. "I promised Clara," he said. "I promised I would keep her secret." He told a story that Eleanor could barely believe. He had met her mother, Clara, in the most unlikely of circumstances. He was a young carpenter and her mother was a young college student. She had run away, come to this town to start a new life. Her mother never talked about her past, only that it was a nightmare. She said she never wanted to go back to the world of the Sterlings. It was a world of deceit, secrets, and toxic relationships. She told him that her father had given her away to protect her from a horrific crime that he had committed. Eleanor's father didn't know what it was, and he didn't ask. His love for Clara was so great that he accepted it all. He agreed with her that they would never talk about her past. They would create a new life, a new story. "We will be a blank book," she had told him, "and we will write our own." But there was a clause in the original deal, a clause Eleanor's father knew. Clara was given away from the Sterling family, not just because she was a bother. She had witnessed something, an accident, a crime. Eleanor's father didn't know, but he knew that Clara's father had arranged for her to be taken away, to make sure she could never be a witness. And he had paid the family who took Clara in a large sum of money. "They weren't foster parents," he said, his voice grim. "They were paid to keep a secret." Eleanor felt the world around her crumble. Her parents, the people she had trusted implicitly, had built their entire lives on a lie. And she was the product of that lie. A mix of pain and betrayal washed over her. She felt like a stranger in her own life. And then things got more complicated. Beatrice Sterling reached out again. She had told her that she had talked to others in the family, and they were all looking forward to the meeting. They wanted Eleanor to come to the Sterling estate. They wanted her to be a part of a big family gathering. Eleanor felt a great tension. She knew that she could not refuse. She had been drawn into a story she never wanted to be a part of. Eleanor flew to Montana, where the Sterling family dynasty resided. They lived in a vast estate, a massive stone and wood mansion with a long, winding driveway. The life there was opulent and complicated. Eleanor felt like a fish out of water. She met cousins and other relatives, faces that were strange but with the same blood. Some were welcoming, but most were cold and distant. They looked at her like an oddity, an outsider. She felt like a pawn in a play she didn't know the script for. Beatrice was overjoyed to see her. She took Eleanor around, showed her family photos, old heirlooms. But with each story she told, Eleanor grew more and more uneasy. She talked about a prolonged lawsuit over their grandfather's estate. A lawsuit that many believed had a secret part of the fortune hidden away. She talked about a power struggle in the family. She talked about an uncle who mysteriously disappeared and the rumors about him. Eleanor felt she was going deeper into a viper's nest. One night, Eleanor woke up and couldn't go back to sleep. She wandered around the mansion, feeling more alone than ever. She found a small library, the one Beatrice had shown her. In a dusty box, she found something she had never seen before. It was a small notebook, written by Florence, Clara's mother. There wasn't much in it. But on one page, there was a note in red ink. Sebastian had a powerful friend who gave something up. Clara was a witness and it was a threat. He made her disappear. Eleanor reeled. The secret was not a financial scandal. The secret was something deeper. A crime. A murder. She couldn't believe what she was reading. She looked at the notebook again, seeing another line written in haste. He worked a deal with William Vance. The man had a lot of influence. William will take care of her. What a miracle. William Vance, Eleanor's father. He wasn't just a man who happened to meet her mother. He was a person who was arranged, who was paid to keep this secret. He had not lied to her. He had simply kept a promise that kept her mother safe. Eleanor felt a deep, profound pain and understanding. Her mother was not a victim who was cast away. She was a survivor, a person who had escaped something horrific. But what had happened to the others? The one who was hidden away. And why did this family want Eleanor to find them? It was surely not just for a fortune. There was another reason, a deeper reason, and Eleanor felt a cold sense of dread as she realized that she wasn't the one who was searching. She was the one who was being looked for. She was the last one left to be a witness to a long-buried crime. The truth had come out, and it was more terrifying than Eleanor could have imagined. Florence's notebook was the key. It not only revealed that Clara was given away to cover up a crime, but it also told Eleanor who the victim was. The victim wasn't a missing uncle as the rumors said. The victim was a cousin of Clara's. A man named Thomas, a man who was most likely to dispute Sebastian Sterling's claim to the inheritance. He had been killed in a suspicious hunting accident. Clara, as a little girl, had witnessed a big argument between her father, Sebastian, and Thomas, and she had seen her father push Thomas off a cliff. Sebastian Sterling had used all of his power to cover it up. He had arranged for Clara to be given away. And Eleanor's father, William Vance, wasn't a nobody. He was a young, ambitious lawyer who was hired by the Sterling family to handle their legal affairs. And Clara's case was the first one he handled. He met Clara, and instead of carrying out his duty, he fell in love with her. He helped her escape. He promised her he would keep the secret, and he kept that promise for a lifetime. Eleanor confronted Beatrice. Tears streamed down her face. "You didn't look for me out of family affection," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "You looked for me because of the inheritance, because you needed my signature, the signature of Clara's daughter, the signature of Caroline." Beatrice couldn't lie. "We need you, Eleanor," she said, her voice full of desperation. "We need you to be a witness. We need you to prove that Clara was alive, that she had a daughter, that you are her rightful heir. If you don't testify, Sebastian's estate will go to a charity. We will never get it." Eleanor felt like a knife was twisted in her heart. She was brought here not because they loved her. They brought her here to use her as a pawn in a game that had been going on for over half a century. She stood up and walked out of the room. No one could stop her. She went to the office of a lawyer she had researched earlier. She gave him Florence's notebook, explaining everything. She told him that she didn't want anything. No money, no status, no new family. She only wanted one thing, the truth. She wanted the truth to be exposed. The lawyer worked on the evidence. He contacted the FBI, the authorities, and the world of the Sterling family began to crumble. The lies that had been buried for so long were finally brought to light. Sebastian Sterling's legacy became a criminal case. Beatrice and her cousins had to face a barrage of difficult questions. And the name Clara Vance, the name that Eleanor's mother had kept secret all her life, was finally honored. She was not a forgotten person. She was a survivor. Eleanor returned home to her quiet life. She refused all offers from the Sterling family. She didn't want a single penny. She only wanted the truth, and she had it. One night, Eleanor went to visit her father. She gently took his hand. He looked at her, his eyes full of memory. "You did the right thing, Eleanor," he whispered. "You kept your mother's promise by telling the truth." Eleanor smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Finally, she had found the answer to the question that had haunted her all her life. Who was she? She was the daughter of a brave woman. She was the daughter of a father who sacrificed everything for love. And she was the one who uncovered a secret that had been buried for 50 years. Now Eleanor has found peace. Peace not in a void, but in a fullness. She knows where she belongs. She knows who she is. This story is a reminder that every family has secrets. But not every secret is a scary one. Sometimes, a secret is just a story waiting to be told. And sometimes, finding family is not about finding blood. It's about finding the truth. If you like this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. And make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss our latest video. See you in the next story.